This is Pepsi Zero.
The new Pepsi Zero.
Pepsi Zero.
Pepsi Zero.
I'll take a Coke.
Is Pepsi okay?
And it's the most confusing product Pepsi has ever released. It's the largest soda in Norway and Sweden in some years, even beating out Coca-Cola. And it's the third most considered soda brand in the UK, even above Pepsi Classic. Pepsi Zero is crushing it in Europe, but in America, it struggled to even gain 1% of the soda category.
I've heard of Pepsi, but not Pepsi Zero. Zero Sugar?
It's not good that no one has heard of this. How is it possible to have literally the same concept kill it in one region, but absolutely flop in another? Why did Pepsi Zero never take off in the United States? This isn't just about a trivial difference in consumer preference. Fundamentally, this product should have worked in America. It should have been just as big a hit. After digging through a ton of financial disclosures from Pepsi, briefs on American policy, and a long, confusing legacy of Pepsi products that lead us to Pepsi Zero, I learned that a failure on this level wasn't an accident. It was part of Pepsi's plan. I want to take you back to 1993. Up until this point, Pepsi had, of course, Pepsi Cola, Diet Pepsi, but also some interesting ones like Crystal Pepsi, Pepsi AM, and Pepsi Raging Raspberry. Keep that one away from your kids. 1993 is a big year for PepsiCo because they're launching Pepsi Max in Europe, a totally new line of Pepsi. This product is risky for Pepsi because it's betting big on two things. The first is a formula innovation. Pepsi's R&D team is experimenting with a combination of chemicals, acesulfame potassium, ACE-K, and aspartame. Aspartame already has a long history in diet sodas. It's the primary ingredient in Diet Pepsi. But ACE-K, that's the big one. It's meant to do something really important. Because on their own, these chemicals are fine. Aspartame has a slow ramp up of sweetness without the burst. ACE-K gives you a burst of sweetness, but tastes a little metallic. Put them together though, you get a burst and a sustain. And if you can crack the ratios, it can really mimic the taste of real soda. And that's big. That's not something diet sodas have been able to do to this point. Diet Pepsi just doesn't taste like Pepsi Original. This is Pepsi's first big bet with Pepsi Max. No sugar, but with a taste that's really close to the original. The second big bet is on audience. They want young men. Diet Pepsi is doing really well with women, but not so much men. Partly because men at the time really associate diet with feminine. There's a whole field of study dedicated to why this is, so I won't get into it. But for the sake of this story, just know it's critical that if Pepsi wants to capture young men, they don't put diet in the name. So these two ideas put together, capture young men and experiment with ACE-K and aspartame, leads to Pepsi launching Pepsi Max in the UK and Italy, but not the US.
Rode it, dove it, flew it, crashed it. New Pepsi Max. Maximum cola taste and no sugar. Live life to the max. New Pepsi Max.
The tagline, live life to the max, says it all. It's extreme, it's dangerous. This is a product for the daredevil, the risk taker, a real dude's dude. And it worked. I couldn't confirm hard numbers from around that time, but many sources mentioned that Pepsi Max's launch was a success. And look, no diet anywhere on the can. That'll be important later. Things are looking good for Pepsi Max's Europe launch, but there's a problem. In America, there's a holdup. Remember ACE-K, the whole reason Pepsi Max's formula actually works? It's not yet approved by the FDA. It still needed to go through the standard long-term study process for approval. Plus, a consumer advocacy group called the Center for Science of Public Interest has concerns that it causes cancer. There's literally a full decade of debate about this, starting in 1988. For now, ACE-K and therefore Pepsi Max are not allowed in America. And this is where things get strange, because 5 years later, in 1998, the FDA comes out and says ACE-K is safe. Pepsi gets exactly what they want. ACE-K can go into their sodas in the United States. If I'm Pepsi at the time, this is what I'm doing when I hear that news. Yeah, I'm popping champagne. I'm telling my wife, buy that second yacht, because I just got amazing news. I can now finally take my bangin' European product and bring it to America. That's amazing, right? Right?
Watch out now! You want to taste life? Then take a big swig of this new Pepsi One.
Yeah, so instead of releasing the established hit stateside, Pepsi releases a totally new product called Pepsi One in the US, not Pepsi Max. And the crazy thing is, Pepsi One releases in the US 1 hour after the FDA approved Ace K. 1 hour. That means Pepsi is waiting for this FDA decision. They have a product locked and loaded for when the good news arrives. And they release Pepsi One instead. I really want to zoom in on this because this is what this whole story boils down to. Pepsi got exactly what it needed to release Pepsi Max in the United States, but chose not to. Both products are using that yin and yang, Ace K and aspartame formula, just with different ratios and sub-ingredients, so they're extremely similar, but not identical drinks. In some regions, Pepsi Max has ginseng in it, but not all regions. Anyway, small ratio differences aside, they could have had both brand and formulation parity with Pepsi Max EU, and they chose not to deliberately, instead having these two distinct products. Am I the only one a bit confused by this? Like, this is literally what you've been waiting for, taking your hit product to a giant market. To be clear, Pepsi never publicly said why it chose Pepsi One over Max, and we couldn't find any documentation that spells out their strategy specifically. But it seems Pepsi thought Pepsi One could reach the audience that Diet Pepsi couldn't. And all of this starts to make a little bit more sense when we take a look at this guy, Roger Enrico, who was the CEO of Pepsi at the time. He has this strategic vision for Pepsi called the power of one. He wants everything across all of Pepsi's food and beverage brands to be focused on unified, impactful changes. That means no tinkering around the edges. He wants big bets. Pepsi One, I imagine, is that big bet. I mean, it's in the name. And it's still supposed to capture young men like Pepsi Max in Europe. So, that's good. But this is still a head scratcher for me because the Max branding is clearly working in Europe. Why not just use that? This whole being confused by Pepsi's decision-making thing is going to continue throughout the story, and it also foreshadows why Pepsi Max never stuck in the US. And look, you don't want to be that brand that almost made it, like Pepsi did with Pepsi One. You want to be the one that takes over. We looked at the real winners, like how Coke used a specific strategy to succeed exactly where Pepsi failed, and our team actually reverse engineered those patterns for you. I've gone through the docs myself, and it's not just theory or stories. It gives you the 4 proven patterns successful products use to steal market share, plus an action framework you can actually plug into your business right now to spot those same opportunities. It's a very easy step-by-step guide to winning in your market. No more guessing. And it's free. You can check it out in the description below or just scan the QR code on screen right now. So, how does Pepsi One perform once it's in people's hands? Maybe you don't need Max if One can stand on its own 2 feet in the US, right? Well, in 1999, it sold 83.7 million cases, according to Beverage Digest data cited by the New York Times. That seems like a strong start, only a year after being introduced. But by 2004, just 6 years after its launch, only 19.2, around a 77% drop from its peak. So to recap, Pepsi One is supposed to be the Pepsi Max of America, and in 5 years, it's basically non-existent. The power of one that Roger Enrico envisioned just doesn't come to pass. And this isn't the worst it's gonna be for Pepsi, because there's a bigger challenge waiting for them right around the corner.
It's over. Done. We nailed it. Real Coke taste with 0 calories.
Coke Zero launches in 2005, and it crushes the game. The publication Beverage Industry reported it held nearly 1% of the entire soda category within a year of its release, and now it's around 4%, which is huge. If you've been watching our channel for a while, then you know I already did a whole video about this. Pepsi's looking at this. Sales velocity of Pepsi One slowing down, Coke Zero gobbling up the category. They have to do something. So, they reformulate Pepsi One. Maybe taste is the issue. Around the same time as Coke Zero's launch, they decide to start using sucralose, another sugar-free sweetener. But it isn't enough to revitalize sales. By 2007, Pepsi concedes. It keeps Pepsi One as its own product, but decides maybe it's time to bring Pepsi Max in its full market-tested glory to the United States.
Hey, you need this. I'll take those.
Wake up, people!
New Diet Pepsi Max.
Finally, Pepsi Max in the United States. Wait a second. Look right there. Diet Pepsi Max? Diet? Remember earlier when I said they wanted to capture young men specifically, so they don't include diet in the name? Again, I'm just really baffled. And here's what else is confusing. Look at this press release right when it launches. Diet Pepsi Max was designed to offer a great tasting solution with a unique formula that invigorates the mind and body, preventing those ill-timed yawns from taking over. They're trying to position this as like an energy drink. It has 69 milligrams of caffeine, nearly double that of Pepsi One. I mean, you can see it all over the ads. People yawning, and then Diet Pepsi Max comes in to save the day.
Nothing to worry about.
New Diet Pepsi Max.
But I'm confused. Is this supposed to be like a health-conscious diet drink, or an energy drink, or both? Honestly, just like me, a lot of consumers were unsure of what to make of this. Why are Coke and Pepsi trying to add these weird new sodas? It has ginseng, honestly I don't know what that does, and more caffeine. Just what I need, more caffeine. By positioning it as both Diet and Max, the brand is basically saying, this is going to be good for your health, but it'll also give you this energy drink level boost. This drink was just trying to do too much. Also, yeah, they added ginseng, which, to be fair, is already part of European Pepsi Max's formulation in some countries. Regardless, all of this taken together, Diet being in the name, waiting 9 years to finally just release Pepsi Max and not an offshoot product, all of it points to why Pepsi Max just never worked in the US. I think maybe the most important thing here, though, is that this has just been confusing. Even for me, who's been researching this for months. Pepsi Max EU, Pepsi One, Diet Pepsi Max. There are so many iterations of this product, so much noise, it's hard to even keep it all straight. Even you all said the same thing on our Coke Zero video. And I think that tells us where this all went wrong for Pepsi, because Pepsi One and Diet Pepsi Max are part of a lineage of Pepsi products that maybe just shouldn't have existed. There was a clear playbook that Pepsi could have followed, one that they themselves created with their own scientific and branding innovations in Europe in 1993 with Pepsi Max. This is what I meant when I said Pepsi Max's failure was planned, because Pepsi bet big on a very similar but ultimately different drink. They decided to take a left turn with Pepsi One and then again with Diet Pepsi Max, and ultimately it didn't work out. And equally as damaging, there were muddy product positionings, formula changes, all of it making it really hard for consumers to actually keep up. The 1998 FDA approval of ACE should have been a slam dunk, floodgates wide open moment for Pepsi Max. Instead, Pepsi led itself down the path of Pepsi One and Diet Pepsi Max and ultimately cost itself its footing in the US. And I'm not saying taking risks or trying new product positionings is bad, but when you already know the answers to the test, why change the questions? Yeah, so there actually is a bit of hope for Pepsi Max in the US though. Diet was dropped from the name around 2009. Then, by the mid to late 2010s, Pepsi Max was rebranded to Pepsi Zero Sugar, finally trying to have branding parity with Coke Zero Sugar. So Pepsi Max doesn't exist anymore, it's just Pepsi Zero Sugar. For the longest time, Coke Zero had roughly 4% market share in the US, the largest in the zero-calorie soft drink category. But as of 2025, Pepsi Zero now sees nearly double the growth rate of the zero sugar soda category. That, at times, puts it ahead of Coke Zero in terms of growth, the long-reigning champ of the category. These numbers are coming from Pepsi, so maybe, I don't know, they're slightly fluffed, but they're also a publicly traded company with financial transparency imperatives for their shareholders. So in 9 years, Pepsi Zero has been able to shrink that gap that Coke Zero long held as a complete given. A huge reason they've been able to close this gap is, yes, the name rebrand, but also the formulation. In 2023, Pepsi Zero ditches the ginseng and caffeine boost and rebalances the ratios of ACE and aspartame to taste more like regular Pepsi with high fructose corn syrup, what Americans are used to. In other words, Pepsi finally learns a lesson. Stick to what you know people like. So, obviously, I couldn't make this video without trying it myself. I got roasted in the comments on my Coke Zero video because you guys thought I was faking it and said I knew which soda I was drinking because of the color of the cap. I gotta up my soda knowledge, I guess. I swear I wasn't faking it. Regardless, let's give this a try. Yeah, interesting. I think I prefer Coke Zero, personally. No shade to Pepsi, though. What makes this story so interesting to me is that Pepsi really never had a product problem. Pepsi Max worked. And while we don't know the exact reasoning behind the Pepsi One decision, it's reasonable to say that policy delays, odd branding decisions, and leadership mandates all led to this tale of two sodas. One that succeeded wildly in Europe, and another that stumbled in the US. It's a rare business case where we can see side by side how the same product plays out across parallel worlds. If you enjoyed this video, you'll love our explainer on why Coke Zero has been able to beat the entire soda industry since it was introduced. And check out our guide about the best products that disrupted the market.